Hey friends, great to hang out with you here on this episode of the Church Tips Podcast. And I'm blessed today to have my friend Jeff Deyo from the great state of Minnesota. Jeff, say hi to everybody.
Hey, what's up, guys? Great to be here. Thanks, Dick.
Yeah. Jeff is on the faculty at North Central University, and he a claim to fame from the past. He was a former lead singer with the great band Sonicflood back in the day, and we're just honored to have him here as part of the team here with Leaders.Church and Church University. Over the last number of months, we've gotten acquainted almost last year, but since the, I think it was September, October, we connected up and began the creation of what is turning out to be the Worship Leadership Track course in Church University. And we'll be releasing that here in the next number of days, so you want to stay tuned to that. Along the way, we've created 2 lead magnets that are designed to be PDFs for you as a worship leader or as a lead pastor. And the first is the Worship Leader's Guide to Navigating Generational and Cultural Gaps. And the second is the Worship Pastor's Guide to Honoring the Lead Pastor. And I think you would find both of these, whether you're a worship leader or a lead pastor, staff pastor, to be very, very helpful. So, and we'll talk about that here at the end because it'll be in the show notes as we're heading along the way. Today, we want to talk about a subject that, we'd all like to kind of get away from. But the reality is, in ministry, when you're dealing with people, there are times you got to have tough conversations. Navigating tough worship conversations. So whether that's lead pastor to worship leader to worship singers, band, production, there are times you have to have those conversations. So Jeff, give us a little jump start. You've been around the block a day or two. You've had those conversations. What are some things we need to be thinking about in those conversations?
Well, first of all, is we don't want to run from, that's the natural tendency, right? Is to put it off, put it off, put it off, put it off. I get it. I struggle with it too sometimes. I've been around enough to know that I shouldn't do that, and I really can't do that, but it's still the natural tendency is to try to put these things off. So, because nobody wants to get that text message, right? Like, hey, can we chat? And you're like, oh no, am I in trouble?
What did I do?
Exactly. But these are very important conversations. And I'm telling you, you're going to do yourself a disservice by letting them linger, not dealing with them soon enough. And so you need to jump into it because you love the people around you. You do want to have these conversations.
Yeah, you really do. And these people are so valuable to the entire scope of the church. It's not just that window on Sunday morning, but it's the entirety of the ministry. And so handling these properly is absolutely critical. How do you, when you go into these, how do you deal with a team member who doesn't respect your leadership?
Yeah, it's tough because that can happen. Sometimes it happens in public, maybe at the rehearsal or something like that. You'll come up with an idea, you say, hey, team, we're going to do this. And then they kind of push back in public, or they kind of laugh, or they smirk, or those types of things. And, depending on the seriousness of it, maybe it's something you don't have to worry about. But if it continually keeps happening, that type of thing, you've got to have that conversation. Now, we all know what happens so often when you have that conversation. You might go to that person, you've sent them that text message and said, hey, we need to get together. And so we finally found the time and the date to do it. And we get together and we have a little bit of chit chat beforehand. And then finally we get to that moment. And you say, well, it feels like you are disrespecting my leadership, or it feels like you're always pushing back, those types of things. And they look at you and go, I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, what do you mean? Like, I respect, so there's always that challenge. And so at that point, obviously you have to talk about it some more and say, well, this is my impression, and I want to help walk through this because I don't want us to have any difficulties. So, it is challenging. Part of it, like I said, is just getting the date scheduled and getting a time to talk with them and a time that works for them and a time that works for me and all that stuff. So, but I encourage you, it will be well worth it, and they will respect you more for having that conversation than kind of, trying trying to bypass it.
Well, my experience on those kind of conversations is as painful as they are to go into, you are glad to be on the other side of the conversation.
Yes.
Even if it doesn't go all that great.
Yep.
But you've stepped into it, and that's a role of leadership.
Yes.
You've got to step into it. Now let's spin this or turn it just a piece. That's between the lead pastor and the worship leader, or the worship leader and a team member. What about conflicts, conversations between team members?
Yeah.
That there's a bump there. What do you do with that?
Yeah. Like when you have two team members that need to talk, or they have a confrontation.
They're going like this, and they're on your team.
Exactly. And one of them, what normally happens is it goes like this, right, Dick? Somebody will come to you and say, hey, I just want you to know, like, so-and-so is really just like really hurting my feelings, or they're really getting on my nerves, or they just said this and they did this and they did this. My very first thing that I always ask, and this is really based on Matthew 18, right? I always ask them, have you talk to them? Because I don't really want you. Now, I'm here to help and all that stuff. And if you come to me, that's fine, because I do want to support you. But I'm still going to end up sending you back to that person saying, hey, listen, I need you to talk to them, not talk about them, but talk to them. And it's that thing again, it might be uncomfortable, but I always encourage that team member to say, look, I want to encourage you to set up a time, or grab them after rehearsal and say, hey, can we just talk for a couple minutes, and not make too big of a deal about it, but to actually talk about it. Now, if that meeting doesn't go well, then that's when I would get engaged, and that person would come back to me and say, hey, I tried, they blew me off, they were angry, whatever. Then I would say, hey, I would probably want to go talk to that person, set up a time where the three of us could talk. But it's really pointless to do that before those two people talk. It's so important to do that.
You referenced Matthew 18. That is the model of Matthew 18, just what you described.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you, I didn't tell you this beforehand. Back in the day, we had a pretty successful high school basketball team, and we played a team up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And the coach told us their two stars did not like each other. Okay, so you're a worship team, you're a worship leader, and you've got this team. A team has to pull together.
Yes.
Here's what he had us do. He had us prevent the other 5 players on the team. The other 3 players, we would not let them have the ball defensively.
Huh.
So the 2 that did not like each other had to pass the ball to each other. And of course, it just was disastrous. Why? Because those 2 couldn't get along. You cannot afford, I'm just telling you, worship leader,
that's right,
pastor, you cannot afford to have players on your team that aren't getting along with each other.
Yeah.
So doing exactly what Jeff said to do, exactly what Matthew 18 says to do is the right thing to do.
Let me say one more thing about that, Dick, too, is just encouraging those 2 people individually to remember that they are not, each other's not the enemy, right? We know the Bible tells us that we don't war with flesh and blood, right? Ephesians 6. So they're not the enemy, even if they're being mean. It's like, hey, I want to develop compassion. If someone's being mean to me, we say this around our house. A lot of people do, hurting people hurt people, right? So it allows me to have compassion for someone who might be biting at me or saying mean things to me. And I can go to them and say, hey, can I pray for you? Or I want to be praying for you, that type of thing. So it'll help.
Yeah, that's good. How do you do with removing someone from the team in a godly way? I mean, probably feels like a last resort, but there sometimes can happen. How do you do that?
Yeah, this is so crucial, Dick. I mean, I really think we do this wrong a lot, because there's this feeling out there in the world, and then also amongst like people who serve at churches, that they kind of get thrown under the bus. And a lot of people, they over exaggerate on this as far as the way they talk about the church. But we've got to do better at this, because it feels like sometimes we just go, oh, moral failure, boom, you're gone. Or, oh, you did this, oh, you did that, you're gone. And we have no love, and we have no support, and we have nothing like that. So, when it comes to getting to that place where somebody needs to be taken off the team, I would say this. that there, depending on the seriousness of the issue, obviously, there needs to be some sort of, there's a couple things. A track record, right? If there's a track record of, oh, we've done this 2, 3, 4 times, depending again on the seriousness, then we know that we've got to deal with this and we've got to be serious about it. Also depends on the way they respond when you talk to them, right? Because you're going to have that conversation. The first time you hear they do something that they shouldn't have done, you're going to bring them in. You're going to say, hey, let's talk about this. And you're going to confront them in love. And you're going to say, look, we don't do that. Our standards are high. We're believers in Christ. The Holy Spirit gives us strength to walk in purity and holiness. So talk to me about what you did, all that stuff. Well, man, you learn a lot from somebody by the way they respond. And, if they respond with humility, like, you know what, you're totally right. I really messed up. And I'm so sorry. That tells you a lot right there. Now, they could be faking it. But, man, the guy's like, I don't know. That's just the way things go. And, they got that defensive thing. Man, now you're in trouble. So the step I feel like that we miss sometimes is the part where we want to bring restoration, right? Instead of just like booting them to the curb, we're like, dude, you're still on the team, but we don't feel like so many times when you take somebody off a team, it feels like a punishment. And in some ways, maybe that is true, but I don't look at it that way. I look at this as, hey, you have a lot going on in your life, too much for you right now to be in leadership like that. In fact, we want to help you get free. We want to help you get yourself right. So we're going to take away some of these responsibilities that might be clouding your judgment or causing you stress and those types of things. But we want to walk with you. In fact, if I'm taking a guy off or a female off the stage, off the team, I'm going to say, I want you to be right up front every Sunday. I want you to be leading worship, but from the congregation. Because what they don't understand a lot of times is that, oh, well, this is my calling. Well, no, look, you lead worship whether you're on the stage or whether you're off the stage. So that's a little bit, we could dive into it more, but that's how I'm feeling about it.
Yeah, no, that's good. There are relationships that happen outside of your worship rehearsals. And the two that come to mind is certainly romantic relationships that can develop, business relationships that can develop between two players on their team. And and periodically, those kind of relationships can get in the way. Now, you're not supervising people's love life. You're not supervising, who they go into business with. However, it impacts you.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that if it starts to go sideways?
Yeah. Well, and it is challenging. Most of the time, if you're dealing with adults, you try to keep hands-off policy. But like you said, there are times where it can go sideways or it can start to interfere with the overall vision of leading people in worship, right? That is our overall vision and everything. We want to filter everything through that. Say, okay, we are here to serve the congregation, serve the people so that they can have an encounter with God that we believe is going to change their life, right? So when that romantic relationship starts to get in the way of that, or maybe in the way of the team dynamic. I think that's what can happen a lot of times is there becomes this team dynamic problem because they move from, hey, we're just friends on a team to there being something more than that. And so, obviously you want to navigate this with care, with love. There could be a moment where you need to call them in and say, hey, I've noticed that you guys have been hanging out a little bit more. I think I would keep it pretty lighthearted. Part of this, I think, too, is making sure that you keep your eye on the culture of your team and you don't wait too long to deal with this stuff. And say, hey, I've noticed you guys, maybe you're just kind of able to have fun about it and say, hey, I've noticed you guys have, and then they can maybe fill in the gaps, say, well, actually we did go on a couple dates and stuff like that. And you just kind of steer them and encourage them and say, hey, I love that you guys are hanging out. That's amazing. And then, if there's some issues that, it feels like it's hurting the team dynamic, then you can bring that up and say, just be careful when you guys are at rehearsal that you're not too focused on each other and not focused on the whole team. Things like that.
That's good. That's good. Well, this is, we could probably take this thing about 6 different ways and all the challenges that people face with it. Well, how would you summarize this, Jeff? What's the takeaway you want the viewers and listeners to grab today?
Yeah, I think the main thing is you have to, as a leader, you have to lean into these conversations. So often worship leaders and lead pastors, we love ministry. We want to sing, we want to preach, we want to be involved in doing all that stuff, but we don't realize that the big element of leading a church is actually dealing with and loving people, supporting people. And I think that's such an important thing. So part of that is conflict resolution. Part of that is just engaging with people in their lives. You can't just sing the songs and kind of run over people. So I just really encourage you guys, love your people, and then make time for those difficult conversations.
Oh, that's so good, Jeff. That is so good. Thank you very much for taking time to hang out with us on this podcast today. I want to remind the listeners and viewers again, the 2 PDFs that are available to you, the Worship Leader's Guide to Navigating Generational and Cultural Gaps. Just go to leaders.church/gaps. And the other is the Worship Leader's Guide to Honoring the Lead Pastor. And that's very simple there too. Leaders.church/honor. So it's /gaps/honor. So you can find those in the show notes, and certainly feel free to bounce around to any of the other worship leadership podcasts we're producing, and keep your eye peeled for, I'm telling you, when this course comes out, it's going every place. And I'm just telling you, I saw the content develop. Every pastor, every lead pastor is going to want this. Every worship pastor is going to want this. So keep your eye peeled, and we'll have it for you coming up in the next number of days. Again, Jeff, thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank
Make
you.
it a great one today.
Appreciate it, Dick.
You bet.
Hey, Jonathan here, real quick before you go. Everything in your ministry rises and falls on your leadership. So investing in your leadership is essential to staying healthy and growing the ministry. And that's why I want to invite you to join us inside the Leaders.Church membership. This online streaming service for pastors gives you access to more than 300 videos plus training material to level up your leadership and improve your ministry skills. If you'd like to do that, I want to invite you to go to leaders.church/boost. Again, that's leaders.church/boost. Well, thanks again for joining us on the Church Tips podcast. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.